Welcome everyone, it's Glacier Guy, rock the Glacier as always. We did it, got a 5th army done. We got 2,000 points of Mordian Ironguard. I mean, you can play in whatever regiment you want, but that was kind of the inspiration behind it because I was using these sweet Victoria Miniatures models that look very similar to some older Mordian Ironguard sculpts. I mean, the regimental doctrine for Mordian Ironguard as it stands right now is just better Overwatch if you're in rank file. And they do have a unique order. Each regiment has a unique order. Let me look that one up. I forgot exactly what it was. Let me check real quick. Mordians form firing squad. Until the end of the phase, the ordered unit can target characters with their rapid fire weapons, even if they are not the closest enemy units. So that's interesting. That is interesting. I'm not sure how often that'll come up, but I think that's pretty interesting. So we're going to go into each specific model, and we're going to be talking about just kind of the paint scheme and how I went through it and give you guys a nice showcase. But just kind of give a brief overview, we have two tank commanders. They're both with plasma, I think it's Radicator or Executioner, I can't remember. They got the plasma cannon on the top, and they got plasma cannon sponsons and heavy bolter on the hull, on the hull, yeah. Heavy bolter in the hull. We have 2 of those, and one of them, no, none of them are the Warlord. We have 3 Wyverns, and we're going to talk about the Wyverns. And we have 3 infantry squads with, the sergeant's got a power sword, las pistol, we got a plasma gun in there, and we have a las cannon in there. Now, this loadout was selected long before the balance update, so the balance update actually changed the list loadout a little bit. But yeah, so yeah, we got 3 of those squads, all the same loadout, and then we have 6 platoon commanders. I'm probably not going to use all 6. Well, in this list there's only 3, but I ended up painting 6, and 2 have chain swords, and or 3 of them have the chain sword las pistol, and 3 of them have the power sword las pistol. We got a commissar with the power fist. We got a tech priest, engine series. The only one I own, and I've had him for a long time. Same with the Wyverns. I've had him for years, and I finally got him painted. And so he's a slightly different color scheme, just because I wanted him to be kind of unique and independent. We got a 3D printed model from Reptilian Overlords for our company commander, and we have a proxied Eldar flyer into a Thunderbolt, and we're going to definitely go over that. There's some backstory behind that. And we have a Shadowsword, the first Baneblade variant I've ever painted, and I got some feedback for that one. That was going to be pretty cool. So let's kind of get into the models. Let's put them on the turntable and let's talk about them. All right, here we are. We're going to start with the tank commanders. Now, before we move on, I just want to say that you'll probably notice there's a theme behind this army. It's got the yellow, it's got the blue. It was basically inspired as a Ukrainian military tribute army, and that's kind of the color scheme I went with. That's why I chose the greens and the grays instead of the typical Mordian Ironguard, which is either all black for their vehicles or a light gray. And I really like the color scheme. One of my friends also says the green and the gray is a Gundam color scheme from the original Mobile Suit Gundam, like the Xeon Forces. And I try to add, I use some digital stencils from Fallout Hobbies, and the stencils on the vehicles worked well enough. There was some issues with some paint removal on the aircraft, but on the tanks they worked just fine, as well as using some hobby masking tape for some of the bigger blocked areas. So we try to go for kind of a digital pattern on the vehicles, except for on the Super Heavy. But yeah, so we got the 1 of 2 plasma tanks, and they all have the same thing. Now they have different. So this one's a little bit more pink, and the pink is actually a base layer of, I believe, Celestra Gray, and then Arctic White, and then a fluorescent magenta to get kind of that plasma glow. And I added a lot more magenta to this tank than I did on the previous one. And I was going to go back and change it, but I was like, it's fine. It shows that one of them has just either charged up to fire or one has just recently fired. I'm not sure which is which, but these 2 were done with Castellan green, and then Mechanicus standard gray for through airbrush, and then everything else was done by hand. And we used acrylic, the tank tracks being black, and then I gave them a dry brush, and then we did an acrylic wash with Agrex Earthshade for the most part. And it kind of gives it a cell shaded look, and I actually really like that acrylic look. And so, yeah. And then we're going to move on to the infantry. All right, here's one of the infantry squads, and we're only going to show one of them. The other two are the exact same loadout. And we did a yellow striping on the left side of the leg and a blue striping on the right side of the leg. And the grass tufts are from Gamer Grass. They're Highland Mix. It's like it's one flower and I think 3 different styles of grass. And these miniatures come from Victoria Miniatures. That's their, I forget the name. It's like the Tannenberg or something like that, or Tassenberg. But yeah, if you go over to the regiments of renown, their art on their website is more similar to the old Mordian Ironguard blue. I went with the green, obviously. The reason why I went with the green is the Ukrainian dress uniform for the Ukrainian army is a green. And then I just I went with additional flair. I stuck with the yellow instead of doing a gold, just because infantry they're kind of small size, kind of lended towards the yellow a little bit better. And I tried to keep the gun barrels as muted, so I went with just a gray instead of a silver. And I was trying to avoid metallics as much as I could in this army, just because it was a lot easier to kind of just get going with the non-metallics, and I didn't have to have 2 different paint waters. And on the plasma gun, I used the same fluorescent magenta. The power sword, I didn't use. I used just normal paints, like Screamer Pink, and I forget the exact colors, but it was basically just if you look up pink on GW's painting app that shows colors, I use that a lot for referencing color triads that maybe I want to try out. You can kind of get what colored pinks I used. And yeah, but most of this was done with a Vallejo Air dark green. So what I did first is I sprayed it in black, rattle can black, and then I used a Zenithal dead white, Vallejo dead white Air Zenithal highlight. Then I did a dark green, and then I started doing all the base coats for the other colors. Hit it with an overall wash of a yellow wash for the yellow parts. Reichland Flesh Shade for the skin, and then I did I think a Nuln oil. Yeah, I think it was a black wash. Yeah, it was a black wash for everything else to try to tie it all in together. And then I went back through and I did up the highlights of Celestro or Castellan green, then some grays and stuff, and I think it turned out really well. So then we're gonna move on over to some of the characters. All right, here we have our platoon commanders. Here's 2 of the 6, and we have 3 of them have the power swords, and 3 of them have the chain swords. They both have blast pistols, or all 6 of them have blast pistols. And I got the other bits from the Scion box, because I had some extra bits from Scions. But yeah, moving on to some more of the commanders, or more of the characters. All right, so these are our three of the characters. We have a Tech Priest, Engine Seer, we have a Commissar with a Power Fist, and we have a Company Commander. Now, the Company Commander is 3D printed. It was the first 3D printed model that I've actually painted. I printed it myself here, and I got it from Reptilian Overlords. I think it was a donation thing. I forget how much I paid for it, but it was, you picked the price, and it was a donation thing for a Ukrainian charity. Obviously, it's got the Ukrainian flag on the stone. I tried doing marbling on the stone, and it turned out with mixed success. And the print turned out okay. The print could have been better. But I think the model looks out pretty good. I put them on a 32 millimeter base just because it's a little bigger than your average guardsman. But with the Tech Priest, I've had that Tech Priest for probably, 5-6 years. Just so whenever they came out with the plastic Tech Priest. And I picked them up and I finally painted them. Now, I painted them different from the army just because I want to use that Tech Priest in multiple different armies. And so, yeah. But the The Commissar, now the Commissar is, I think he's out of print. I don't think they make him anymore. I could be wrong. They might still make him, or they could always bring him back. But he's got the Power Fist. He's reading from the book. He's spouting the good word. And I really liked painting him. Now, this is funny. This is the second Commissar that I painted green instead of painting black like typical Commissars. And I don't think I've painted a single Commissar the color you're quote unquote supposed to paint them. Yeah, I mean, I think they turn out really well, and hope you all also like them. So I think next we're going to move on to one of the Wyverns. All right, so this is one of the 3 Wyverns, and they were a lot of work to paint. Now, I had sub-assembled these way back in the day, so you can take the guns off, you can remove the whole canopy back section, you can take the infantry dudes out, the crew, and so I had to I painted everything individually, and it just took a long time. Very similar to the Basilisk. It was just not only was it a lot of pieces that had to be painted individually glued, those guns were a pain. On the other 2, and I'll take one for a showcase. On the other 2. I used a oil wash instead of using the acrylic wash, and they came out looking different, but it was a little faster doing the oil wash than the acrylic wash. Actually, it's kind of a mix of oil and acrylic, so we'll get one of those on the table. Let me grab one of those real quick. All right, so one of these guys. So yeah, so we did, this was actually a mix. So on the guns themselves, they're actually, there was a base coat of Mechanicus Standard Gray. And then I did an overall wash with agar shade across the whole gun. And then I went through with a heavy dry brush, and that's how I kind of got the edged highlights on those. And I kind of like how that came out quick. It was way quicker than doing the panel lining I did in the first one that you saw. And I didn't pick out all the details in the back, but I think it looks pretty nice. And then the actual rest of the vehicle, so this top part was just done with acrylic washes. The base of the vehicle was done with an oil wash, and that was kind of a half burnt umber, half ivory black, I think it is, with some mineral spirits. And I think the oil wash turned out pretty fine on so this model, I did not do a gloss varnish. I just went right onto it with acrylic. And I think I only had to fix 1 or 2 areas, but I kind of left them alone. And then after this is when I tried the gloss varnish after this. And we're going to get into that next. And we're gonna do the Shadowsword. All right, so we have the Shadowsword right here. I finished this model actually a couple hours ago, and it was relatively easy. So I actually glued all the parts in so the guns don't move. Nothing is posable or whatever. The only thing about that I wish I hadn't done, because I had to re-glue it on, was that antenna right there that you see on the top. I wish I had actually not glued that on when I built it. I wish I had left that off, because it was just more of a pain and ended up snapping off anyways, and I had to re-glue it back on. But aside from that, this one, I didn't use the masking tape or the digital patterns from Fallout Hobbies or anything. This, all I did was I airbrushed it all gray, and then I went over and did some stripes with Castland green. And I was using, what was I using for reference material? I was using one of the Imperial Armor books. They don't, one of the older Imperial Armor books that's got a lot of art in it. I was using that as a reference. And basically, yeah, that's pretty much all I did today. Was I woke up and I did all the base coats, and then I did a gloss varnish with some, I think it was Tamiya clear gloss varnish, and then I went through, and for I think it was about an hour, 2 hours. It was probably about 2 hours. I went through and I did every single rivet and the panel lines, and I hit them all with the oil wash, and then I went back through and I added some random, what do they call that? Typhus corrosion to certain spots. So you might see certain spots have a little bit more corrosion than the other. That's actually me adding typhus corrosion, especially on some of the canisters and the fuel canisters in the back. And And then after I did all the oil washing, which kind of gives it like a brownish look, then I went back through with a matte varnish and knocked down the gloss, and then that looked pretty good. And this is the first Super Heavy I've ever painted, so I'm actually kind of excited to get the other ones. I have a Baneblade, I have a Storm Hammer, Storm Lord, and I have 2 Storm Hammers, I do believe. And I think I have one more. Baneblade. No, I have a Crassius. That's what I was going to. So I have 5. So yeah, I have 5 of the Baneblade chassis variants. I thought about getting that Omega cannon, the huge plasma cannon, which I think is still in stock. So maybe in the distant future, I do plan on getting a Deathcore Krieg army, and I might make one of those. But I'll probably just reprint that actually. We'll figure that all out in the future. But this turned out really well. A lot of fiddly bits. I learned a lot. Unfortunately, I kind of wish I would have painted this before I assembled any of the other ones, because then I kind of learned what I would have liked to sub-assembly paint. But it would have been a lot better. But I think it turned out all right. And I didn't pick out every single detail. I kind of just picked out a few things I thought were good and then kind of went with it. But I think the Volcano Cannon is going to be pretty cool, and hopefully it does pretty decent. It doesn't die in the first turn. But we're going to move on to the last thing in the army, which is the Proxy Thunderbolt. Now, before we get into the Thunderbolt, the first thing I wanted to go over was the base. Now, when the war in Ukraine started, there was the rumored, the fabled Ghost of Kiev. And then there was the old lady who came up to the Russian soldiers and basically told them they should carry sunflower seeds so their corpses could fertilize the next generation of sunflowers. And that just kind of hit me really hard. And I was like, man, I gotta do something about it. And I donated, and I emailed my representatives and everything. I was expressing my support, but at the same time, I was like, that's so significant. I want to do some sort of showpiece about it. And I ended up, and I was like, I could do a model. I could do a Ghost of Kiev model. I was like, I can use, it'll make the base look really nice. And so I used some Vallejo sand compound, some cork. I used a bunch of bits lying around. That dead pilot on the ground. And there's got a bunch of skull bits from some fantasy bits from skulls. And the sunflowers, funny enough, are actually hobby model train sunflowers. And they're from, I forget what company makes them, but I found them on a train website, and they were not cheap. It was like $16 for a pack. They're really sturdy though. They have some sort of metal rod inside them. So they're really, I really like how they turned out, and used some gamer's grass. And then I just had other random bits lying around. I did get some paint and stuff on the flight stand, but it's fine. I don't know if I'm going to bother cleaning it off or not. Maybe at some point I would. But I just want to pause it right here. So why I chose orange for so it's supposed to be a downed enemy pilot, because this is supposed to be a jet that shot it down, and then aside from the fields of the other things, but and then obviously you would have a survival radio with him more than likely, but the pilot is orange. This might be morbid, but a lot of Russian fighter pilots wear an orange compression suit for inclement weather, for like really cold weather if they have to get out of the plane. I don't know the full details behind it, but I saw it because one of the downed Russian pilots earlier in the conflict, he was captured, and he was wearing a strikingly orange suit, and I was like, that's not real. I wasn't sure if that was real or not. And I looked it up, and I was like, the Russians actually do have that orange suit. I mean, you can say whichever you want about that. But so it's kind of why I went with the orange. Also, I bought the full orange triad for a model I did a long time ago, and I kind of just wanted an excuse to use the orange. But yeah, so I don't know. Maybe at some point I need to do like a Chaos Renegade. Like if they ever bring back like the Renegade Guard, like the Chaos Guards, maybe I'll have to do orange for the Chaos Guard. I think that would probably be pretty good. But that would kind of tie it in together. And then I have some cultists I'm planning on printing out, but I'm probably going to stick with the color scheme for those cultists that are already pre-established. But yeah, so that's kind of explains the base. Let's get the aircraft on the stand. Right now that we've looked at the base, we're going to take a look at the aircraft itself, and it is based upon a Nightshade Interceptor aircraft, which is the type of aircraft. But if you were to try to look this up on to buy one, it's actually would be a Crimson Hunter or the Hemlock Wraithfighter kits. The Crimson Hunter is the actual pilot in the aircraft. This is the configuration for the Crimson Hunter aspect aircraft. As like the way the wings are swept off, and not the Hemlock Fighter, because I think Hemlock Fighter has more psychic abilities. I think. Now that's the basis for the aircraft, and the reason why I went with this is because I wanted to use the Thunderbolt, and I was going to buy a Thunderbolt off Forge World. I didn't have a problem. I wasn't trying to save money here. Actually, the bits I used in the model itself, if I bought them all from scratch, if I didn't have the bits lying around, it would have been way more expensive than the Thunderbolt currently is. But I went with this because the shape of this model is very close to the SU-27s and similar airframes that the Ukrainians pilots are using. And so that's kind of why I went with this shape aircraft. But I'll show you the as you've seen the rotating, we have the yellow and the blue kind of tie it in with the rest of the army. It's a different color scheme, but that's mostly because the ground forces that you've seen before throughout the video, they're based upon the Ukrainian army ground forces, but this is based upon the air forces. The air forces have two primary color schemes. They have a blue, gray, and then lightish. They have a similar color palette to this. Obviously, their digital pattern or their patterns are different. This is just kind of the pattern that I had available. So not a 1-to-1 exact replica, but I think it looks all right. But the other color pattern is a white, gray, black color pattern that they typically use for their other digital design. But I like the blue, and I had already bought the blue paints. And so we went with that. Now what we did is because the Thunderbolt comes with the same flying base stand. So we're like, all right, the stand's the same. It comes equipped with a Thunderbolt autocannon, which we used. And let me pause it right here. Let me stop the spinning. So let me grab it. We'll tilt it upwards. So what we did is we took 3 of the barrels from the Hydra kit, because the Wyvern kit is also a Wyvern or Hydra. I think it's a dual kit. I believe it. So I had a bunch of these extra bits lying around. So I stuck 3 of the barrels inside the front intake. I think that's an intake. Or no, I think you could put a weapon there, but I think it says intake. But I put 3 barrels in there to simulate the autocannon. And then it has 2 las cannons. So I put the 2 las cannons where the other Eldar weapons normally go. And then it has the optional Hellstrike rockets rack, I think, a Hellstrike missile rack. And so what I did is I took 4 Hunter Killer missiles and Hunter Killer missile base mounts to be like hard points, attachment points for the missiles. And I put those on the bottom. And so, yeah, that's how I got with this Proxy Thunderbolt. So I could have used the Eldar, I could have just used a Thunderbolt model and given it the same color scheme, but I don't think it would have looked correct. I think the shape of this aircraft is way closer to the Thunderbolt, or to what I was trying to achieve with this model. And yeah, I get it. Someone's going to be like, oh, well, you're going to come across an opponent who doesn't like proxying models, and then you should use the real model. And it's not that I wouldn't use the real model. It's that it didn't fit the scheme I was going for. If you look at the Thunderbolt, it's really chunky. It's, you could say like, well, the Su-27 is a Soviet, it's a chunky aircraft. But if you look at the Su-27 compared to like the F-15, they're very similar in like style and shape. Obviously, they're completely different in performance and like the way they maneuver and everything, but they're very similar in shape. And the only kind of Warhammer 40K-ish aircraft that has a very similar profile would be the Eldar aircraft, at least this one. And I actually was going to just use an SU-27 model, like a 1/35th scale or something. I forget what the scale was going to be. I was going to use just a regular model, but I ended up went with this model instead because I think it actually looks really good. Plus, one of my friends was like really adamant. He's like, "No, you got to use this one. This looks way cooler." So I went with this, and yeah, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. And then right after I finished this, one of my friends was like, "You really should make an Eldar army now." I was like, "I don't want to make an Eldar army." Also, like the guns on this don't match the Eldar's guns, so why would I make it an Eldar army? I mean, it would be kind of cool. Now, the camo pattern was from a stencil design from Follow Hobbies. What I did is I used my normal black primer, and then I put a base coat of Vallejo Model Air. It was one of the grays. I forget what it was like. It was like light Russian blue, I think is what it's the gray, but they call it a blue. And I laid that down, and then I waited an hour or so for it to cure, and then I put the first layer of stencil stickers on there, and then I shot the next layer of paint, which is that lighter blue, and then I put another layer of stickers on there, and then like these vinyl stickers, and then I shot the final layer of the really darker blue. And then I went to peel them off, and when I was peeling them off in a bunch of places, it had torn the light gray bottom layer, and in a few places it even tore the light blue layer. So I had to go back through with a brush and hand brush in those areas. And then I went and did a gloss varnish in the whole thing, and then I did oil washing in the cracks. For this specific model, I think it turned out really well. I did use a lighter gray on the bottom that you've seen. This is a completely different color, light gray on the bottom. And the reason why I did that is it's not looking like anime as crap, man. That was really nice. Obviously, there are some spots if you look really closely that I had to clean up. The reason why I went the lighter gray on the bottom is if you look at a lot of modern aircraft, there's a different tone on the bottom of the aircraft versus the top. The top is typically for like if it's on the ground or parked. It's supposed to kind of a lot of aircraft are a certain color to where if you're flying above the aircraft and looking down at it, it's trying to obscure your ability to see it. So that's why the digital pattern's on top. But if it's flying above you, they try to give you kind of a sky pattern, which is why it's a lighter gray on the bottom. It's just camouflage design. And so I wanted to mimic that. And I actually have a bunch of other aircraft that I plan on mimicking the same thing as well. But yeah. And so, yeah, this is the last model for the 2,000 points. The next upgrade for this army to go from 2,000 to 3,000 points is going to be a Marauder Destroyer, a Stormhammer, and some Ogren. Now, there is also, to really kind of flush this army out a little further, is I'll probably get 3 more infantry squads and to include some heavy weapons. And I know that right now the meta is just screaming, last cannons, last cannons, last cannons. But I'm really thinking about getting 3 infantry squads with the plasma gun and the power sword, but also to give them mortars. Because guard, indirect fire is still king in the guard, and so I think having 3 squads that kind of just sit back a little further and just use more indirect fire while my super heavies and tanks and aircraft kind of maneuver around the battlefield, I think that'd be kind of cool. And if not, I can always pull some las cannons or las cannons in from other armies. Because the guard they like to cooperate between regiments. But yeah, so that is 2,000 points of Mordian Ironguard, and hope you guys enjoyed the tribute. And yeah, I'm gonna try to get a preliminary battlefield set up to start doing the next stop motion battle report. It will be this Mordian Ironguard army that you've seen here versus the World Eaters. I was going to do my Talarn or my Catachans versus the World Eaters, but I'm going to go with this army, and yeah, so we're gonna get it all set up, get the battle space set up, and then we're gonna start getting stop motion filmed out. I was hoping to have this army done last week so I can do all the stop motion this past week, but that's well, this army took a lot longer to paint than I really thought it was going to, and yeah, but it turned out really well. And hope you enjoyed, and look forward to the stop motion. It's just going to be 2,000 points versus 2,000 points. And first time that my World Eaters are going to fight against the Guard. So I think it's going to be fun. And I'm really curious as to how long the Storm Lore or the Shadowsword is going to last. There's some decent shooting in the World Eaters army, but there's a lot of melee. And so I don't know how that's going to work out. It might be interesting. I will be using Open War, like normal, but I will be using the Balanced Data Slate, Hammer the Emperor changes that happened. Yeah. Let's see, anything else? I did order some upgrades for the World Eaters, but we'll get into that when they come in. And I got some upgrades for the Space Wolves. But the next army that I paint, part of me is like I should finish the last few models to get this army up to 3,000 points. But there's not a huge rush to do that. And I kind of want to get some more of my other 2,000 point armies done. So it's either going to be Sisters of Battle or Death Guard. Yeah, so I'll probably figure it out whether I want to do Death Guard or Sisters of Battle. I do have some ideas for Death Guard as well, and time and money. But anyways, hope you guys enjoy and have a good one. And if you want to support me in the crazy things I do, there's a link in the description below for my book. I wrote a book, and it's on Amazon. You can either get it in Kindle e-reader format or in paperback, and it helps me out. So aside from that, please like and subscribe and leave a comment. Let me know how you like the army, what you thought about it. Do you like the Thunderbolt conversion? Do you think it's kind of dumb? I'll buy a Thunderbolt at some point. But I really do like this model, and hope you enjoyed, and see you around. Goodbye.